And in the beginning of it all, a group of 6 friends decide to become adventurers, to go out in search of treasure chests around the world, and thus, conquer riches and glory. In this, one of the boys says that the goal of the whole group is only one, to be the best heroes in the world. And besides that, he aims to go to the capital Zabrudia. And after a few years of this dialogue between the children, Cry walks through the streets and explains that in the imperial capital, treasure hunters are treated like stars, and they travel all over the world in search of the ruins that are called treasure chests. And when they find these treasure chests, they get several precious objects, but in return, this work is extremely risky, as the heroes are in constant conflict with monsters called ghosts. And moving further into the capital, Cry comments on the First Step clan, which is considered a very high-level group within the capital, and they are currently conducting interviews in a bar, with the intention of recruiting new members for the clan. And moving on, he explains the dynamics of the clans, which in this case, function as a society among members, benefiting everyone. And Cry states that there is a certain limit to how far hunters can go alone, and that it is crucial for them to join a good group, so that they can become stronger with exceptional companions by their side. And in his case, Cry regrets, as he was not able to join any group, until suddenly, a girl calls him, asking if he is also looking for a group. That said, she introduces herself as Ruta Rubek, and says that she has just been promoted to level 3. In this, he introduces himself as Cry Andre. However, he does not greet her, leaving the girl with her hand extended towards him. In this, Ruta ignores this detail and comments on the White Wolf's Nest vault that she tried to conquer, and as Ruta ended up facing many difficulties with it, she decided to be part of a group, to be able to advance further as a hunter. And in the middle of the conversation, she is interrupted by a man, who starts to disdain her, saying that that place is not for hunters as weak as her, because in the capital, being at level 3 is not cool. At that, Ruta corrects him, and says that the vacancies to join the group did not require a minimum level to apply, and when she sees that he will not leave her alone, she challenges the guy to a fight. Then, one of the group's representatives notices the movement in the line, and asks the two to calm down, otherwise, they will lose the chance to join his clan, and furthermore, he informs them that hunters should never draw their weapons in public, as Ruta ended up doing. And after that, they finally enter the bar where the hunter selection takes place, and then, Ruta is impressed by the caliber of all the hunters around her, since this is her first time there. And as for the Cry, he says that it is already his 5th time there. And as she looks back at the hunters, Ruta notices a specific group and asks who they are. Cry tells her that these are the Ark Brave, the children of the Holy Spirit, and of the groups they are hiring, they are the strongest of all. After all, they managed to complete a level 7 vault with only 6 members making up the group, therefore, they can be considered a group of the highest elite. As for the person sitting there, Cry says that he is the leader of the group, a guy named Ark Rodan, and if he accepts the hunter as a member of his group, that hunter's success is practically guaranteed. However, Cry claims that he has never seen him accepting new members at an event like that. And in the middle of the conversation, they are interrupted again by the same guy from before, in which he notices her in doubt about an empty table at the event, and then, Greg explains that that is the table of the group that created the First Step clan, the so-called Straggery, or Strange Grief, which in this case, are a group of young people who went to the capital a few years ago, and as the group was full of talent, they became one of the biggest and most respected groups in the capital. In this, Cry informs that this is the group of his childhood friends, and as for Greg, he comments on Strange Grief is accepting new members, and precisely because of that, the place is more crowded than usual. And suddenly, one of Cry's childhood friends starts shouting in the middle of the bar, asking Straggery to accept him as one of its members right away, and upon hearing this, Tino goes to him to put the boy in his place, and says that she is the one who deserves to be in Strange Grief. At this, everyone around moves the tables and chairs out of the way, so that the two can kill each other at will. After all, the fewer candidates, the better. And upon seeing the big problem that was about to start, Cry decides to leave the bar, until suddenly, Tino notices his presence, and goes to Cry to ask what he is doing there, and in the middle of the dialogue, she calls him master. At this, Ark Rodan notices his presence too, and reveals that Cry is in fact the master of the clan and leader of Straggery. And then, Cry tells a little more of his story, and says that a few years ago, when his group had just arrived in the capital, they managed to finish some beginner treasure chests in record time. However, Cry felt that his level was nothing compared to the other 5 members of the group, who in his opinion were much stronger. And as for Cry, he felt like an extremely ordinary hunter, and thought that he would end up hindering the entire group if he continued with them. But on the other hand, all his friends were very nice, and never complained about his level, and so, Cry decides to make the decision to leave the group on his own. But upon hearing this, one of the boys begins to reflect on the group, and notices that they still don't have a leader, and so, he asks Cry to take over that position. And upon hearing this, Cry becomes even more lost, as he feels that his friends didn't even listen to what he said, said, about leaving the group. And over the years, Cry ended up being the leader of the group even without wanting to, and always wanted to retire from hunting as soon as possible. And returning to the present, Greg and Ruta still don't believe that this young man is the leader of the first step. And as for Ark Rodan, he approaches Cry to mock him, and says that he really is usually late because he is too sleepy. Tino then steps in to defend his master, and Cry explains that he simply overslept, and so he didn't have time to get ready properly. But even after explaining the whole situation, Cry feels that people don't listen to him, and that includes all the other hunters besides Ark Rodan. And upon seeing Ark continually disrespecting his master, Tino asks Cry to remove him from the clan, but Ark continues to ignore her, and asks if Cry has managed to find any potential new members yet, to which Cry asks if he would accept a suggestion for a new member. And upon hearing this, Ark says he is willing to accept any hunter he recommends. After all, he trusts Cry a lot. In this, Tino says that she would be very honored if he chose her, as she is already more than decided to join him. But in the midst of all this, Gilbert begins to draw attention to himself, with the intention of being the chosen one to enter the Strangry clan. And when analyzing the boy's current state, Cry notices that he wouldn't be of much help. However, he believes that the boy can be polished if he goes through Ark's training. But as he begins to think hard, Cry realizes that he doesn't have the experience to judge anyone, so any suggestion he makes will be based on luck. At this point, Cry decides to suggest Gilbert, but first, he explains to the boy what he considers most important for a hunter to have. In this case, it would be strength, because if one of the members of a team lacks strength, the entire group ends up being put in danger. Therefore, Cry asks the boy to show him the ability to not lose, because only under this condition will he recommend him to Ark Rodan. And having said that, Cry claims that he has never lost even once. After all, he has never been in a real fight, which ends up making things easier for him. And then, Cry makes an announcement to everyone, and says that he will recommend him to Ark Rodan. Brave is he who obtains the treasure that is in his hand. Then, he throws the ring in the direction of all the hunters, making them fight for the treasure. And then, the ring starts falling into Gilbert's lap, but Tino acts quickly, kicking the boy away, but she loses the ring anyway. And as for Cry, he takes advantage of the fact that everyone is looking for the ring and goes home. And the next day, he reads in the newspapers about the confusion he had during the Ark recruitment. Brave from the previous day, which ended with everyone blowing up the entire bar. And although no civilians were hurt by this, the vice master of the clan Eva Renfide informs him that the Adventurers Association wants to have a talk about it. As for Ark, she says that he just read the article and laughed. Upon hearing this, Cry asks her to put the bar repairs on Ark's tab, and in addition, he places the responsibility of going to talk to the Adventurers Association on Ark's lap as well. However, Eva informs him that the association wants to talk specifically to Cry, and upon hearing this, he decides to go, as Lieutenant Gark might go to him if Cry doesn't go there. At this, he asks to go with an escort, to avoid being attacked out there. However, Eva reminds him that no one would do anything to him at that time. Cry then decides to go straight to the scene and falls to his knees, apologizing for all the trouble he caused. Seeing him so hurriedly, Gark asks him to control himself a bit, but Cry continues to apologize and says that only the building was destroyed, and as for the people, they remained intact. Gark explains that even though they haven't received any official complaints, the First Step clan needs to be an example to the other hunters, so Gark says he can't let him get away with this. Upon hearing this, Cry realizes that he will have to work in one of the boring jobs that the Adventurers Association gives to those who misbehave. In this case, these jobs are known as paying punishment. And then, Cry tries to convince Gark to absolve him of that punishment, saying that he did not do anything so serious. However, Gark tells him to go ahead and choose a punishment to fulfill. In this, Cry chooses a level 3 one, called Bone Collection. After he leaves the place, Gark comments to his secretary about Cry, and says that he is still as energetic as ever, and besides, he chose the mission that seemed to be the most dangerous, not caring about anything. And in the meantime, Cry goes to Tino, and discovers that she was the one who found the ring that he had thrown at that time. In that, he calls her to help him with a job for the Adventurers Association, but upon hearing this, the girl evaporates immediately. And soon after, Cry finds her. However, Tino complains to him, saying that she wanted to be taken out for ice cream. And when they talk more about the mission, Cry reassures her, saying that she will go with more people. Remembering his past with his fellow hunters, Cry goes back to when they first arrived in the capital. He tells his friends that he will be a burden to the group, so Cry suggests they go back home. But upon hearing this, Luke says that he is too worried about something very trivial, and so he takes the lead, and kicks down the guild gates, and then he raises his sword and asks the best swordsman in the place to appear. And upon seeing him stealing all the spotlight, Lee stands next to Luke, and introduces herself to everyone as the best rogue in the world, and says that they are there to register as treasure hunters. And while talking to the other hunters, Luke imposes himself on one of them, saying that a man's true strength lies in his versatility, not in the weapon he uses to fight, and in his case, Luke uses a wooden sword, which for him, is what makes him the strongest swordsman of all. And as for Cry, he continues with the procedures to register the group, until suddenly, the receptionist asks him to say the name the group will have. However, Cry notices that they hadn't thought of it yet, and then, the receptionist suggests that he take some time to think. After all, the group's name will represent them, so it must be chosen carefully. However, Cry takes this opportunity to ruin everything, and decides to give the group a funny name on purpose, just so people think they're not that strong, so he chooses the name Strange Grief, and upon hearing this, everyone questions this name, saying that it doesn't sound like the name of a group of heroes. In this, Cry takes advantage of everyone's disappointment, and says again that it would be best for him to leave the group. However, everyone starts to change their speech, praising the name he gave, only with the intention of making him stay in the group. And even with this strange name, the group Strange Grief managed to reign in the golden age of treasure hunters, gaining enormous prominence, including Cry himself. And returning to the present, Greg says that he is still in disbelief with what he is seeing, and asks if Cry is in fact the leader of the Footprint clan. In this, the people around begin to praise him, saying that he is the famous 8,000 Tricks, a hunter who is already at level 8. And as for Tino, she asks everyone to kneel before her master, now that they know how incredible he is. However, Cry asks her not to exaggerate so much. And as for the name 1,000 Tricks, he explains that this was the second nickname he received as leader of Strawberry. After all, those leaders who stand out a lot end up receiving special names from the association, and end up becoming true idols. And upon hearing that, Gilbert is disbelieving, and states that Cry has no way of being the 1,000 Tricks, because he doesn't seem like a guy who trains that much. And upon hearing this, Tino gets angry, and starts making some provocative comments towards the boy, but she is soon reprimanded by Cry. However, she remains firm in her opinion, and makes it clear that she will not be able to work with Gilbert. After all, the boy is just talking and not doing anything effectively. As for Gilbert, he starts fighting with Cry again, saying that he is not level 8 at all, and Greg calls him an idiot and says that he is picking a fight that he cannot sustain. Cry just ignores the boy, saying that he will leave him as he sees fit, and then he just asks Greg and Ruta to help him in his mission, and tells Tino that she can ask for help from someone in the clan, if she needs it. And when he finished solving everything he needed, Cry turns his back to leave. However, Gilbert catches his attention again, challenging him to a fight, and says that if he defeats him, he will go along on the mission. In this, Cry puts Tino to fight him, and when they come face to face, Gilbert remembers that he really did end up being careless on the day of the ring. However, he makes it clear that this will not happen again, because this time, he promises to go for it with everything. And then, Gilbert makes it clear that he will face Cry as soon as he defeats Tino, in which Cry informs him that his opponent is also level 4, therefore, he will not be able to defeat her so easily. And as for her, Tino makes it clear that she does not have the slightest chance of losing a fight against him, even though she considers herself far inferior to her master. And to prove what she says, she drops her weapons, and decides to fight him with just her hands. And upon seeing this scene, Cry realizes that she is not 100% wrong. After all, Tino does indeed seem to be stronger than the boy. However, Cry says that the real problem is the blade of purgatory that Gilbert carries with him. However, the boy feels underestimated, and decides to fight without his weapon as well, but as soon as the fight begins, Tino transforms Gilbert into a bird, making him fly with a kick straight to the face. At this, the boy gets angry and tries to hit her again, but Tino manages to trap his arms, and then tells him not to disrespect his master anymore, if he doesn't want to feel that pain anymore. And finally, she finishes the boy with a single blow, leaving everyone around impressed with the strength of the Strange clan. Grief. Gilbert then remembers his past, when he trained hard to become a hunter, and even as a child, Gilbert managed to surpass some adults with the sword. He continued training until he finally reached the capital, formed a group and began to conquer several treasure chests. And this gradually created in his mind an illusory feeling that no one could defeat him. And seeing him still wanting to fight, Tino suggests that Gilbert use his sword to face her. However, the boy refuses, but soon after, he agrees with her, because in a real fight, Gilbert would certainly be killed by Tino. As for Cry, he notices that the boy apparently left his group due to the difference in strength he had with them, and upon hearing this, Gilbert asks how he knows that. And then, Cry says that he went through exactly what he is going through, and upon seeing him say this, Gilbert understands everything wrong, as he believes that Cry is the strongest of the group, and is just being very benevolent by continuing to hang out with people weaker than him. Then, Cry takes the boy's sword to test it, and notices that it really is a good weapon, although it is somewhat simple. And upon seeing the amount of flames that his sword is emanating, Gilbert is surprised, as he was never able to awaken all that power in the blade of purgatory even though he is the owner of it. And moving on with the journey, Cry explains that mana is considered the fundamental substance of the world, and as for the treasure vaults, they are a phenomenon in which spiritual lines and other forces condense the mana material, and thus, manifest limited alternative worlds based on memories extracted from the world's core. And as for the White Wolf Nest, it is one of these treasure vaults, which was originally inhabited by wolf monsters called Silver Moon. However, this species ended up becoming extinct, due to the unbridled hunting of them for their fur. In this, a vault appeared in the White Wolf Nest along with a bloody wolf ghost. And after saying all this, Cry starts to get scared of this place, as it was created through the vengeful feelings of a race of wolves. At this, Eva reminds him that it was he who asked his allies to go there, and then, Cry explains that this vault is level 3, so they will be fine with 4 people. At this, Eva changes the subject, and comments on the show he put on with Gilbert's sword. However, Cry says that the Blade of Purgatory is quite easy to use. After all, Gilbert himself was able to use it without having much knowledge. Having said that, Cry notes that it would be a good idea to try to buy the sword from the boy. However, Eva reminds him that he already has a lot of relics, so buying another one would be a huge waste. And besides, she reminds him of the loan he had already taken from Citri. And after this conversation, Cry meets with his friends, and one of them comments about a ghost that suddenly appeared on the northern road and destroyed an entire caravan, even though they had an escort. And because of this, the Knights of the Third Order began to recruit people to go hunting. And according to the witnesses, the ghost had the form of a wolf, so they believe that this ghost came from the White Wolf's Nest. But upon hearing this, Cry goes into denial, and tries to convince himself that this is all just speculation and that Tino will be fine. As for Cry's friend, he comments on the strength of the ghosts in the White Wolf's Nest having suddenly increased, to the point that people are thinking about changing the level of that vault. And upon hearing this, Cry becomes worried, but things get even worse when he discovers that a level 5 sorcerer and his partners have also disappeared from that place. And then, Cry disguises himself with his friends, saying that he sent Tino there just as a way to train her more intensely. And soon after the conversation, Cry decides to go out to get some air, and calms himself down again, telling himself that Gilbert is a very capable swordsman, so as long as he has the Sword of Purgatory in his hands, everything will be fine. But upon saying this, Cry wonders if the boy charged the sword after he used it. And meanwhile, Tino and the whole group notice that the place seems to be very dangerous. However, Tino believes that everything was coldly calculated by Cry, who sent them there with some plan in mind. But upon hearing this, Greg opposes the girl's deduction, and reminds her that they met yesterday. Therefore, he thinks that Cry would not put them to act together in such an important mission. But as they think a little more, Greg and Gilbert begin to believe that everything was planned, even if it wasn't. As for Cry, he regrets sending them on a mission without thinking it through, and to make matters worse, Cry realizes that he won't be able to call for help anymore due to the time, so he decides to go after them on his own. Meanwhile, Tino and the others come across a giant ghost of a wolf, but everyone is shocked to see that the wolf has armor and a sword. As for Cry, he looks for some specific relics that he will need to take with him, and in the end, he throws everything in a bag and starts heading towards his allies. But on the way, he is approached by Eva, who asks what he is doing with that giant bag hitting his back. At this, Cry tries to give a lame excuse, saying that he is just going out somewhere. However, Eva immediately notices that he is going after Tino, but even so, Cry says again that he is just going for a walk, and then, he activates a flight suit relic and leaves Eva behind. But she begins to remember that this relic has a huge defect, because although it takes off and continues to glide, it does not have a method of pausing or landing, so she wants to know how he is going to do it. And that was another video. If you liked it and want more videos like this, subscribe, and leave your like. Here on the screen there is another video for you. Until next time.